Her biggest struggle turned out to be her biggest blessing.
I am a very ordinary 36-year-old mum. And I come from quite a very ordinary sort of background. If there was one thing that was a bit different about me, and probably still is that I am that person who has always wanted more. I've always kind of pushed that boundary and been looking for a way to create a life on my terms. And that comes with resistance the whole way along, of course. But the biggest struggle for me, what it actually turned out to be my biggest blessing. And that's kind of why I wanted to talk about it, because although I've always had this drive, I never knew what I had to offer. I never knew how I was going to create the life that I wanted. I just had no idea how I was going to do that. And I was constantly told that it wasn't possible, but I had this inner belief it was. I just didn't know how I was going to get it. And actually what turned out to happen, so I wouldn't work a 9 to 5, I wouldn't work a normal job, I didn't want to work for somebody forever, I didn't want to be limited by salary, I didn't want to be tied to a desk. So I worked in direct sales for a long time whilst searching for how I was going to create this life. And eventually realised, I tried all sorts, I eventually realised I needed passive income and bought a house to renovate. But then I had my little girl, and this is where I entered this period of my life where, I mean, it always just seemed like a struggle. I'd done okay. I'd earned decent money. I'd been on my travels. I'd gone on adventures to climb mountains and done things that I wanted to do, but it always felt like a struggle. I always had debt in the background. I always had resistance. There always seemed to be something. But after having my little girl, everything just seemed to intensify. And I entered this period of my life where it just really did seem like a huge struggle. And there was a lot of stuff going on there. I mean, I had, in order to take a maternity leave, I'd had to stop renovating the house and spend my cash. So I was broke. I had debt up to my eyeballs. I had a car accident. I eventually lost my income altogether. And then I had a really traumatic personal kind of family issue going on that I could talk about all week, and I won't. But to give you kind of in a nutshell, it kind of blew everything up. I was already feeling very vulnerable because my income had gone, and you know, after having a baby, I think you lose yourself a little bit anyway. And I just felt so trapped financially. I felt horrendously trapped, and it was the most trapped I'd ever felt as an adult. I remembered the feeling from being a kid, and it was what I think had always driven me so hard to want to create my own freedom. And being back in a situation that made me feel so trapped was really difficult for me. I really struggled with it for the first time. I felt like I was really struggling to deal with things. And to compound all of this, what really made it worse was I had this situation that came about where, like I said, I'll try and keep it in a nutshell, but growing up as a child, I grew up in a household with a very abusive, my mum's partner was very abusive. On lots of different levels. So we dealt with a lot of domestic violence. He was also a paedophile, unfortunately. And when I was younger, we had him put in my 20s, we went to the police and we actually had him put in prison. Now, what happened was my little girl was 2, and I'd been struggling anyway with this feeling of being trapped financially and everything else. And then all of a sudden this situation arose where he had been released and I had not been told. And he had been released close by to me. I had a little girl that obviously is my world. And without going into, too much detail, the stuff this threw up for me was huge, and it was on top of this feeling of already feeling trapped and already feeling like I was struggling. So that period of my life has definitely been the biggest struggle I feel like I have kind of faced, and definitely the struggle that I struggled with the most. So I started to suffer with anxiety, and really I just went into self-sabotage, complete self-sabotage, and just everything just seemed really hard. But why I wanted to mention that was because actually out of that struggle came everything that I have now. So now
Yeah.
I have an opportunity to work from home on my own terms around my little girl. I'm the hands-on mum that I always wanted to be. I am now in a position to start exploring my passions, which I just never had since I was a kid, because I was so stuck in survival mode. So my arts and speaking, and, you know, I'm creating an online course to hopefully help people come through that feeling of trapped and move beyond it. And I've found purpose that I never had before. I had the drive to find it, but I never knew what it was. And that only came through going through that struggle.